Okay, recording is in progress.
Great, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. It is Thursday, February 18th. This is a noticed meeting of the Executive Director Search Committee of the State Bar of California. Thank you for joining us, those of you who are attendees, and of course, thank you to Trustee Sowell and our staff for assisting in putting all of this together. This is an open and public meeting, and accordingly, there is an opportunity for members of the public who so desire to address the committee on the agenda item that is posted. Before we do that, let us get officially on the record with the roll call, please.
Okay. Duran?
Here.
Sowell?
Here.
All members present.
I love it. Unanimous. Okay, so it looks like we have a couple of attendees. Do we know whether anyone would like to address the committee? Trustee Tony, is there anything you'd like to say? If so, please raise your hand in the Zoom function. Okay.
Okay, no hand raised.
Looks like not, no hand raising. Our agenda has listed in the open session some items, and in the closed session. The first item in the open session is the chair's report. And so I will report that in accordance with our last meeting, at which we directed staff to execute a contract with the firm Bob Murray & Associates to assist in the recruitment and search, that has been done. So thank you, Mr. Mazur. Thank you, Ms. Phillips, for being here to join us this morning. I think, you know, it might be wonderful to have Ms. Phillips introduce herself and her firm so that we have a little bit of background on who will be helping us perform this important task. I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Good morning. And very pleased that we've been awarded this recruitment. We're excited to get moving pretty quickly. My name is Valerie Gaeta Phillips. I'm president of Bob Murray & Associates. Our firm has been conducting executive recruitments for probably close to 20 years. My husband and I have owned the firm for a little over 7. Proud Latina business owner. A lot of our business is primarily in California for government entities, whether it be state, federal, municipal government, special districts, JPA, as well as nonprofits. And it's usually executive level, you know, CEO, GM, city manager, as well as department head level recruitments. We are located in Roseville, but like I said, most of our recruitments are in California, but we do primarily conduct recruitments in the 11 Western states. And we have a staff of, there's about 10 of us in our office, and take a lot of pride in our group. We pride ourselves in our outreach efforts and customer service. And we're hoping to find you the best executive director.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. Mr. Trustee Sowell, do you have anything you'd like to add or ask of Bob Murray & Associates?
If I could just do this first, Mr. Chair, and that is, Steve, I think I figured it out.
Yes.
I don't know if you see me in the waiting room yet or not.
I do, yes. I will promote you, your video to panelists, and then you can disconnect your phone. Give me just one second to do that. Okay, that should be happening momentarily. Okay.
What an ordeal. Valerie, nice to see you again, and thanks again for taking on this task. And I know we've had some brief conversations, I think, previously, just a little bit about the firm and about how you're going to go about the task of finding us an executive director and sort of narrowing that down for us. But if you wouldn't mind, and I don't need you to go through it in sort of excruciating detail, but if you just at a fairly high level, I guess maybe this is also partly for the public, just to describe the process a little bit, if that's okay.
Sure. So with the recruitment process, today is considered the kickoff meeting. And from that, I gather notes. I also have some previous notes, but I gather notes about what you're looking for in your next executive director, kind of your ideal candidate. I have the job description and all the other information. So what my firm does is we gather that information, we put it into the brochure, the ad text, and that will go out to roughly about 200 plus potential candidates. And I'll go through this kind of help list that we put together of people that will receive the brochure, a hard copy, but there'll probably be a lot more folks that'll receive like a PDF version. It gets posted onto our website. We place ads with at least a dozen different sources for potential candidates. Ads run roughly about 5 weeks, 4 to 5 weeks. And during that time, I'm conducting my outreach, which means utilizing social media. I'm actually calling people to see if they might be interested in the position or who they might know. I might gather some names of potential stakeholders from you guys today and the board in general of folks that I can conduct outreach to. We place, like I said, ads in numerous locations, and we can go through those later. So the recruitment stays open for 4 to 5 weeks. I'm giving a weekly update to you two gentlemen, I believe, or the search committee, just saying, okay, this is the feedback I'm getting from candidates. This is who's applied. Just some, any, whether it's positive or negative, any feedback I might be getting from potential candidates. Once it closes, I'll have already started going through some of the resumes of those that I think really stand out based on our conversations of ideal candidate and the job description minimum qualifications. So I'll have already started kind of my pre-screening process. Once the search closes, we conduct a public records search on the candidates that I will be interviewing, and my interviews will be about an hour long with, let's say we have 8 candidates. Let's say we get a total of 25 candidates. I screen it down to the top 8, get approval from the search committee. Okay, these are the folks that Valerie's going to interview. I set up a Zoom interview. Everything's kind of video right now still. It'll be an hour interview with each candidate, me kind of going through, I'll have the same questions for each candidate, but I'll also go a little bit off script because I'm also just trying to get a feel for fit as well. Once I interview those candidates, it'll take me probably a couple of days. I'll put together what we call a recommended finalists book, which is an ebook that'll contain all the applicants' names, the complete list, and the resumes of those folks that I've interviewed, along with their cover letter and applications and a summary sheet. And then it'll have my recommendations. So let's say I interview 8 candidates or 10 candidates, but I'm recommending 6. And we'll walk through that and during a meeting, these are the 6 candidates I'm recommending, and this is why. And it's a real kind of flexible process. There may be candidates in group 1 and candidates in group 2, and we may move someone from group 2 to group 1. And I can go into that in a little more detail later, but that's typically the process once we decide, okay, Valerie, we agree with you. These are the 6 we want to move forward. My firm schedules the interviews. I'll work with probably Steve or someone there to make sure we've got everything lined up for Zoom. We put together e-books, which are e-interview books. It'll have all the information on each of the candidates, interview questions, rating sheets, and forced ranking. All electronic versions that you can do on your computer. Sends the details back to me. I save that information and forward it to HR for their records if that's what the board wants me to do. That's what we've done for other recruitment, CEOs, city manager type recruitments. At that point, let's say, and I don't know if it's going to be a scaled down version of the board interviewing the first round. So let's just say it's the search committee interviewing the first 6. And then the second round is the top 2 candidates coming back to meet with the full board. We'll have started references and backgrounds on those candidates before they come back for a second round interview and provide those to you to have to review prior to the second round. We may not call their current employer, but we'll have conducted the other references and background and make sure there's nothing negative that's coming up. We provide all that information to the board as well. Very transparent, make sure that you guys have all the information you need prior to moving someone forward into the second round. And after the second round, hopefully there's a clear winner. And we tailor the search at that point to what the client really wants. But sometimes I recommend that, well, I always recommend, but it's up to the board, that the executive team has a chance to review, let's say, the top 2 candidates prior maybe to them coming back. I've even had it where the executive team interviews the top 2 candidates the morning of. They're not ranking the candidates. They're just merely, and I'm facilitating it. They're merely giving me feedback. Hey, I know, pros, cons. And then I give that feedback to the board before the board interviews the second round. And sometimes that helps tip the scale. Let's say the board is really, there's just 2 candidates and they can't really make a decision. Sometimes feedback from staff really can help with that decision. If the board decides not to have the executive team interview the candidates, I would recommend that maybe they take a look at the candidates that you guys are moving forward, because they may have prior knowledge. That's what I call kind of a backdoor reference. Maybe one of the executive teams had worked with one of the candidates in a previous life, 10 years, and could offer some really important feedback, good or bad. And I think that's important. You don't want any surprises. And we really try to make it so that there aren't any during the whole process of the recruitment. That's why communication is really important. I don't think it's a smart idea to have board communicating with candidates either. Everything should be facilitated through me. That way nothing gets out that shouldn't get out, or that we make sure that the communication is clear, the steps are clear, the candidates are fully aware of the process. I've kept them in the loop. So once we get to the point, top 2 candidates, we narrow it down to 1 and we start the negotiation process. And I'm there to help facilitate that. Everything again gets funneled through me. And if I'm working with someone there at the State Bar and HR, even better. I think to have, make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, to make sure we have everything in alignment and that there's no mistakes made.
Thank you for that. Mr. Chair, the one thing I just heard in Valerie's presentation, and I don't know if this is appropriate for this conversation or something we need to do in closed session, is just a determination as to whether or not will we be interviewing candidates initially and then moving them on to the full board, or will we do it as a full board and not have that process where we do maybe an initial sort of weed out?
So I think that's an appropriate question to answer in open session as it relates to process. And actually, more importantly, as it relates to the report out from the closed session that the board conducted last month. My understanding of the direction from the board was that this subcommittee would bring back to the board final candidates, thereby essentially giving us the authority to interview people ahead of time, so that, whether it's the top 3, the top 2, the top 4, that's who the board would be interviewing. And there were a couple of reasons for that. Primarily, the controlling reason was we want to move relatively quickly, right? We do want to be deliberate. We want to put out a wide net, but we also would like to get somebody on board sooner rather than later. And Ms. Phillips did mention the timeline, and I caught a little bit of, maybe it's a little bit of a condensed timeline compared to what some other searches might entail in our circumstances. So unless you disagree, Trustee Sowell, I think that I am comfortable on the assumption that we as a subcommittee will do the initial round of interviews, and then we can talk more in closed session about how many that ultimately ends up being based on who Bob Marine Associates brings to us and who expresses interest.
Totally comfortable for that and appreciate the clarification.
No, of course. If I could just add just a little bit, Valerie, you mentioned city manager searches, and I have to tell you that one of the things that impresses me about your firm, and one of the reasons why I'm glad that we have you on board for the search, is your company has a long history and a reputation for understanding the fine balance between a confidential personnel search on the one hand and a public entity that has to do quite a bit of things out in the open and in public. And it's not always easy to maintain that balance, right. But it's certainly important for the privacy and the personnel issues that are surrounding any executive search like this. And so I just want you to know that I appreciate that piece of your resume, and I'm looking forward to benefiting from that experience.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'm overly sensitive to it. Working with a lot of councils and boards, you have to really be aware. So I'm very careful.
Yeah, no, it is a little bit of a hybrid, right? It's, unless you've been exposed to those particular dynamics and issues, it can be easy to trip something up without intending to. So We're going to rely on your expertise and your counsel, along with our general counsel,
Right.
to make sure that we do this search right and we produce hopefully some very good candidates for the board to consider. I believe that may be all that we should or need to discuss in open session. Unless there's anything from you, Trustee Sowell, I'm going to recommend that we convene in the closed session for the next part of our conversation. Mr. Mazur, do you have anything to add for the record on the public side?
No.
Okay. All right. So the trustees have. Go ahead, Arnie.
I just want to make sure that I don't cause another glitch here for closed session. Steve, you're sending out that link separately.
It's in the same in the email I sent you. That link is there further down at the bottom in red, so you'll see.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you on the other side.